Got to join Josh Winger from the law firm of Byrd and Byrd LLC with our weekly tips. Good morning, Josh.
Morning, Bill. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. Hey, Josh, when someone decides to make a last will and testament, where do they start?
Sure. In Maryland, the base requirements to have a last will and testament are that the person be at least age 18 or, of course, older and be competent to create a last will and testament. Some structural requirements include that the last will and testament be in writing, signed by that person or by some other person at his in his presence and express direction, like if a person can't sign on their own, and then it has to be attested and signed by at least 2 or more credible witnesses in the presence of the person whose will it is. Now, the will can also have what we call a self-proving affidavit, which is a statement signed by the witnesses and notarized in case the witnesses are needed, but they can't be found when the person whose will it is has passed away.
Okay, now, Josh, what are some of the typical things to include in a will?
Sure. Well, one of the very important provisions of any will is to nominate a personal representative, who is also known as an executor, to be responsible for administering your estate upon your death. Now, our firm also extremely recommends you nominate at least one alternate personal representative to serve in case that primary one can't serve or will not serve. Now, in a will, there are 2 typical ways you can give your property to others. Number 1 is what's called specific bequests, which are when you give specific things to specific people or organizations. This could be like specific dollar amounts or specific belongings like jewelry, coin collections. And the second kind is what's called your residuary estate, which is the remainder of your probate estate after payment of expenses, taxes, debts, which are, and then the residuary estate is distributed by percentage to the people or organizations you designate. Now, as long as there's enough property in your estate to pay your estate expenses, taxes, debts, then those charges normally are not taken from the specific bequests and instead are paid out of what's left after those specific bequests are distributed. Now, another very important provision I want to make sure to talk about is to include in your will is planning what would happen if a beneficiary that you designate passes away before you. For example, if one of your primary beneficiaries unfortunately passes away before you, then do you want that portion to be divided up among the primary beneficiaries who survive you, or do you want that primary beneficiary share instead to go to that beneficiary's descendants? Or do you just plain want something else entirely to happen? In your will, you have a lot of freedom to do what you feel is best for your loved ones. That's important to keep in mind. An example would be you may want to give one of your children the ability to live in your home the rest of that child's life before the house is sold. Another example is you can create trusts for disabled beneficiaries, like beneficiaries with gambling problems, spending problems, or beneficiaries that are just too young to inherit. Now, bear in mind that the property to which a will applies generally includes only property for which you are the last living owner and for which there are no direct designated payable on death or transfer on death beneficiaries.
Now, what if someone thinks they do not have anything to make a last will and testament worthwhile, Josh?
Yeah, virtually everyone has some reason to have a last will and testament, even if he or she thinks there is nothing of general value to give to anyone. Wills are about more than just distributing money. For example, a last will and testament can be used to nominate a guardian for a minor child or to designate who you want to take care of your pet. A last will and testament can also be used to provide detailed organ donation or funeral instructions, and a person can also have a will to designate whom they want to get personal family belongings, just like photo albums or other mementos.
Okay, now what if someone has a last will and testament created outside of the state of Maryland? Will Maryland honor it?
Well, wills can be created in different places all over the world, of course. Here in the U.S., each state has its own laws for how to create a last will and testament. As a result, the laws vary from each state, but a lot of states have what we call a reciprocity law, meaning that if your will was properly created under the laws of one state, then another state will honor that will, even if that will does not otherwise meet the criteria of that second state. For example, Maryland does have a reciprocity law. So Maryland honors a will that is properly created elsewhere if that will is also in writing and signed by the person whose last will it is. If all that's true, then Maryland will honor that last will and testament, even if it does not otherwise qualify under Maryland's laws. So basically check to see wherever you have property what those laws are there.
Okay, Josh, we have about a minute left. If any of our listeners have additional questions or want to learn more about estate planning, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, well, we've got 2 offices for convenience of our clients. Our Bowie office is at 14300 Gallant Fox Lane, Suite 120, zip code 20715. Our other office is in Prince Frederick. It's at 30 Industry Lane, zip code 20678. Our phone number for both offices is 301-464-7448. Now, as a reminder, we'll be hosting our monthly Medicaid Monday workshop on Monday, July 14th from 5:30 to 7 p.m. at our office in Bowie. And we also have an estate planning takeaways workshop on Thursday, July 17th at our office in Prince Frederick. All of these workshops are free, but space is limited to 10 people, so you should call and reserve your seat. There will be light snacks and refreshments served. We do these workshops on the second Monday of each month for Medicaid and the third Thursday of the month for estate planning. So if you can't make the July dates, that's okay. We have workshops planned for August and September as well.
Okay. Well, hey, thanks for joining us once again. Pleasure having you as always, Josh.
Sure. Thank you very much, Bill.
And we'll see you next week for more tips with Byrd and Byrd, attorneys at law. Eligible law lawyers with offices in Bowie and Prince Frederick, Maryland. Not just good lawyers, good counsel.